If, and I do mean if, a big if Giannis does want out of Milwaukee, could the Houston Rockets be a landing spot for him? We'll discuss that on today's crossover episode of Locked On Rockets and Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What it do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, an NBA analyst with the Locked On Network and co-host of the Technical Foul Podcast, joined by Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets for today's crossover episode examining if Houston could be a possible landing spot if Giannis asks out, which I've said it before, I'm saying it again, I hope he don't, but if he does, could Houston make some sense? So we'll dive into that on today's episode, but we truly do thank you for tuning in and making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We can find us Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. On the YouTube side of things, make sure you subscribe, like up the video, drop those comments. Let us know how you're feeling about if Houston makes sense as a landing spot for Giannis, and also just where you currently are. How likely do you think it is that Giannis stays or goes, with the news that he will be meeting with the Milwaukee Bucks sometime this week? So fingers crossed things go well. But in the meantime, in between time, we continue to take a look around the league of where possibly Giannis could land. And today we're landing down in Houston to talk that through. But today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year.
And diving into our Locked On Bucks and Locked On Rockets crossover edition episode, that is Camille Davis from Locked On Bucks. I'm Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets, and we are here to talk all things Giannis Antetokounmpo as the trade rumors and reports are swirling. Giannis is doing Q&As on social media, even though there's all this speculation going on as to whether or not he'll be a part of the Milwaukee Bucks next season. And Camille, we got to start right there with just kind of, give us the lowdown on kind of what's going on right now with Giannis and why things have, I don't want to say deteriorated, but gotten to this point where now it feels like Giannis may, a Giannis exodus may be on the horizon here.
Yeah, I've said this before too, and I feel like I'm so popular right now with the Locked On host because like everyone's like, let's do crossover, let's talk Giannis, and I'm like, it feels nice to be popular. I wish it wasn't for this reason, but it does feel nice to be popular. But I think the difference this year is just how the Bucks have been performing. Other summers before his extension, the Bucks were looking pretty good in that regular season at least, but now you're in a situation where it's been 3 straight first round playoff exits. You don't have many draft assets left in the cabinet to try to go out and make a real immediate win now type of move. So creativity is going to be needed, as well as I think a little patience if Giannis does choose to stay in Milwaukee. And that's where I think all eyes are going to be here in Milwaukee and around the league, because it's reported that this is the week where Giannis will sit down and meet with the Bucks brass sometime this week per Chris Haynes. A midweek meeting between Milwaukee and Giannis is going to be an important meeting, a big one, because they're going to have to try to see where he's at and sell them on what their vision of the next iteration of the Milwaukee Bucks built around him will look like.
Absolutely. And look, these meetings are, sometimes it feels like a last ditch effort, like what can we do to convince you to stay kind of thing. But operating under the assumption, and I apologize to you, Camille, because we're going to have to operate under worst case assumption for the Bucks here, but operating under the assumption that meeting does not go well, right? And that the Bucks then have to pivot and try and figure out what their next steps are, assuming Giannis does want out of Milwaukee. What becomes the next step? Obviously finding the right deal for Giannis, but what would the Bucks be looking for in a Giannis return? Some teams look to completely tear things down and just go the full rebuild route. Other teams want to maintain some semblance of competitiveness, trading for maybe another win now type star player. What would the Milwaukee Bucks be looking to get back in a Giannis return?
What makes it difficult, I think, outside of trying to assign proper value to someone like Giannis, it's the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks don't have control of their first round draft picks over the next 5 years. And normally when you're in a situation when you're a bad team and things aren't going your way, at least you have your own draft picks to bank on. But for the Bucks, unless a trade for Giannis, if it happens, if it happens, unless that trade would involve like the Pelicans or the Trailblazers, who can kind of get the Bucks back some of their picks. I think the Bucks will be holding a premium, trying to get at least assets, not even from the team that they're making the trade with necessarily, because a team with Giannis, you probably won't draft until the end of the first round anyways, because he is that good. You're going to want to have some other assets. So like teams that may have another team's first that could be valuable. Like, if someone had a Phoenix Suns first round pick, that could be valuable. So I think it's the picks for sure, but also you need another like young star. I think you can try to build around for that next era of what Bucks basketball could be if Giannis does look around and think, this ain't the place for me to try to be competitive at.
When you think about this upcoming meeting, that Chris Haynes already reported and that you mentioned briefly there a second ago, at this point, does it almost feel like it's a foregone conclusion that Giannis is going to be gone with kind of the way the rumors are swirling, with the way everything feels, with the 3 straight first round exits, which aren't necessarily his fault is the other thing. Like I see a lot of, fans of other NBA teams who are like, oh my God, okay, Giannis got bounced 3 straight times in the first round. Well, like health and other factors have been a thing for this Bucks team. It's not squarely on Giannis's shoulders. So where do you think things kind of stand as we get ready to head into this meeting this upcoming week?
Yeah, I've bounced around so many different times. Like at one point I was like 70-30 Giannis stays, and I was like, is it really like 60-40? Is it 50-50? Right now, as we record on Sunday evening, I'm actually feeling optimistic about Giannis's chance of staying in Milwaukee again. I think I'm back to like that 70-30 range of Milwaukee, him staying in Milwaukee 70%, might ask out 30%, because there are some enticing places that he could land where I'm like, okay, I could see why you could look at that situation and think I have a better shot to win a championship there than I do in Milwaukee. But I think what Milwaukee can offer Giannis is worth staying around. I think a large part of it, one, is the Eastern Conference, which has gotten better over the years for sure. And you got to respect, the Knicks, the Pacers, Detroit's coming up. Cleveland had a great regular season. If the Magic get some shooting, like you got to respect what's going on in some of these teams.
Wow, man. Just Orlando Magic getting stray shots in a Rockets Bucks crossover.
I respect the Magic. I love the defense, but golly, the half-court offense, which Rockets, relatable to a certain degree.
Unfortunately, yes, but man, Orlando is a whole different beast.
That is very true. Very true. So you have those teams, but like your pathway to the championship is still easier in the East than it would be in the West. And I think most destinations that Giannis would be interested in being traded to would be in the West. So it's like, would you really have a better shot in the West, a more competitive conference, than you do in the East, especially if the Bucks can kind of sell him on like, this is a 2-year thing, right? This year, we're retooling. We're going to make sure we get the ball back in your hands even more. We're going to make this a Giannis-centric offense. You might be able to put up some crazy numbers this year, Giannis, and we're going to surround you with players that can fit. And next summer, we're going to plan to try to get more so that next year we can really be seen as a competitor again for the championship.
That sounds like a great message, right? A great pitch to Giannis. But when you look at the Bucks kind of asset situation, you already talked about the fact that they don't own their future, asset. How much maneuvering is this Bucks team really capable of doing to retool around him or put different pieces around him at this point? Or are they kind of just devoid of assets? Like what pieces would have to be moved to be able to put a better team around him?
Right now, they have their 31 first round pick, 32 first round pick that you could trade, but I can see the Bucks being a little bit more hesitant to put that out there because it's the last of what they really have to offer. And that's another 6 years out. And in another 6 years, Giannis will be 36, 37 years old. The team looks a lot different if he does stay that entire time. So that's like their real asset there, which is why I think next summer, when you have a few more expiring contracts, you might be able to get yourself in some better situations than you could this summer, especially when you have a few more assets available, because like the next 5 years are pretty much gone here. So you got to continue to kind of wait it out, be able to get some more on the table.
Coming up, what would a deal between the Bucks and Rockets actually look like? Which pieces are untouchable and which pieces would have to be included in any potential trade? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, when it comes to checking your bank account, if you've ever sat there and wondered, where did all my money go? Sometimes it can be dining out, online shopping, entertainment costs. It can be really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Look, when I started using Monarch Money, I got to be honest, I was embarrassed at how much I was spending, eating out, food delivery stuff, dining out at restaurants, all that stuff. Now I budget smarter and I save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your very first year. And continuing on here at our Locked On Rockets and Locked On Bucks crossover edition episode. All right, Camille. So when we start looking at a potential framework for a deal between the Rockets and Bucks, I did an episode last week kind of just preliminary, kind of like exploring what Giannis to the Rockets would look like. And I may have jumped the gun. I got a lot of pushback on how much I was willing to include in a potential Giannis trade. So I'm very curious your thoughts from the jump, looking at the Rockets roster, looking at the pieces that could potentially be coming back to Milwaukee. Let's start formulating a trade here. What would it have to look like for you? And we can, put on our GM hats and do a little bit of negotiating and some jockeying and all that stuff and figure out, who has better negotiating skills here in a second.
Well, if we're going to do a negotiation, I have to start higher than what it is I'm actually coming in trying to get. But my first non-negotiable, if there was a Giannis trade to Houston, like Amen Thompson has to be that centerpiece player, I think, going back to Milwaukee. I know the money isn't there, so you have to throw in a lot more money around him. But looking at the players, like that's the piece. That's the intriguing piece because you can see just how gifted of a player he is already at this young age. Like I know the offense is still coming along, but the athleticism, the defense, the age, just what he projects that he could be, that's the player for me where it's like, if there is a trade with the Houston Rockets, Amen Thompson is the very first player. I'm like, he has to be in this deal. I've seen like Sengun has been floated around, Jalen Green. I got some questions about Jalen Green right now. Like, I don't know if he might have the biggest contract that goes back to Milwaukee there, but like the player itself, I have some questions around his development and who he could be. But Amen Thompson, that's my centerpiece player in the trade.
Okay. And, it's really tough because one, the way that Giannis plays and his entire play style and his impact on the court, Amen Thompson plays like a smaller version of Giannis at times, right? Like he's kind of a wing version of Giannis. He can lock down your best player. He has, incredible defensive metrics and impact stats on that side of the floor. And he's only in year 2 and he's just kind of starting to discover. He's kind of like, watching a giraffe learn to walk for the first time. He's like only just now figuring out like just how impactful he can be on the offensive side of the floor. Unfortunately, and this is where this is going to be the immediate stalemate right here is, and I really don't know because I can talk myself into many different versions of a trade for Giannis. I can also talk myself into a version of this team that simply can't function with Giannis and Amen Thompson sharing the court together. And therefore I could talk myself into Amen Thompson being the centerpiece for a Giannis trade. But everything that I know about the Rockets and how highly they value Amen Thompson, he is likely the one and only truly untouchable piece on this Rockets roster, even more so than Alperen Sengun, who's the only all-star currently on the team, the first homegrown all-star of this Rockets team since Yao Ming, many years ago. And so that's kind of the tough pill to swallow for Bucks fans, right? As you're looking at the Rockets roster, what could we get back? I have to say, Amen Thompson's not going anywhere. I would be absolutely shocked to see him included in any deal for Giannis or any other star player that may be on the move this offseason. That's how highly the Rockets value him. And they truly believe that he has, the potential down the line to be a, top 15, top 10 kind of superstar player down the line. There was some reporting out of NBC that came out that said, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. Houston has optionality. This trade can be structured in many different ways. Houston would be open to trading Alperen and Sengun, league sources told NBC Sports, but the Bucks may be higher on a Jalen Green-based trade, depending on how they rate Green. Jabari Smith Jr. is likely to be part of any deal, and the Rockets have a lot of future first-round picks, their own and others, such as Brooklyn and Phoenix picks, that could be a part of the trade. It likely takes a third team to make the math work, but it's very doable. So that's something that we already touched base on a little bit, right? The picks part of the package being very interesting. The Rockets having the future Suns picks, as well as still holding on to one more pick from the James Harden trade with the Brooklyn Nets all those years ago. So if we start right there in the negotiations, and I have to knock you down a peg from Amen Thompson down to, say, Alperen Sengun is the centerpiece, are we still talking, or are you immediately like, I'm going to hang up the phone and go see what other teams have?
We can still talk, but those draft picks better talk really, really loud. And I think for that third team probably would have to go in. Like, I remember, I think it was last week, since this Giannis stuff broke, my timeline has been a complete, like, just hodgepodge of just memories. Like, I can't remember the days of the week at this point, but I think it was last week. The Athletic put out an article with a few different trade options, and the one for Giannis to go to Houston was a 3-team trade involving the Bucks, the Rockets, and the Blazers. So the Bucks were able to get back some of their draft capital from the Blazers. And the trade that they had was that the Bucks get Amen Thompson, which, as you just said, that's off the table for you. But Athletic proposed Amen Thompson, Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore, Donovan Clingan, the 2025 first via Phoenix, the 2027 first via Phoenix, the 29 first, most favorable of Milwaukee, Portland, and Washington, a 2028 and 2030 Milwaukee swap rights extinguished. The Rockets would get Giannis and Jeremy Grant. The Blazers would get Sengun and Jock Landale. And that's what I think would have to happen if Amen Thompson is off the table, the draft pick aspect has to become overwhelming, I think, in that point, because at least as a GM, you can sell hope of, hey, we hope that these draft picks can work out. We didn't get the young guy we really wanted, but we can sell some hope here. But I'll let you know what you think about that amount of draft capital being given up. And then also on your end, hearing that Jalen Green could be in trade, the discussions for Giannis, Sengun could. Of those two players, which one would you be more inclined to fight to keep in Houston?
As far as the draft picks part of the equation goes, this is the delicate balance, I think, for the Rockets to kind of approach with. And I want Rockets fans to really try to take this to heart, is any move for Giannis is suddenly like, that's the all-in move. That's your championship window is suddenly ticking. Like, you better be ready to compete for titles at the highest level. You better be confident that iteration of whatever's left over after trading for Giannis, obviously you could still make some more moves, but like, if you go all in, if you cash in every pick that you have at your disposal and a bunch of the young guys to get Giannis in a Rockets jersey, whatever you have left better still be championship caliber, because you only have a finite amount of time with Giannis in the, smack dab in the middle of his prime right now. So from the picks perspective, I understand. And you go back and look historically, right, at players of Giannis's caliber when they were dealt. Oftentimes it's basically the max amount of picks that you can get rid of, right? Four future first, 3 swaps, 4 swaps, whatever you can essentially get rid of under the Stepien rule, that's what you get rid of. Now, things are maybe a little bit different for the Rockets because they own other teams' picks, right? They're not foregoing all of their own draft capital. So that's where you can maybe start, negotiating a little bit, like, all right, we have all these juicy picks, right? The Suns look like a dumpster fire. The Nets really aren't going anywhere yet. All those future picks, in addition to some of the Rockets' own picks that they could still put up in the offer, that's where you maybe start getting into it. Like, you wouldn't be able to just get your hands on every single pick. You'd probably have to start picking and choosing a little bit and saying, like, all right, well, we're willing to give you this one, but we're going to hold on to this one, right? Because this one has some intrinsic value, or this one's going to be a lot better or worse or what have you. I do think somewhere in the realm of like anywhere from like 4 to 7 picks is like probably the right ballpark. As far as the difference between Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green, it's really tough to look at this Rockets team and not basically want to hold on to at all costs Alperen Sengun and Amen Thompson as your two franchise cornerstones, as the two best players on the team. And there are going to be a lot of Rockets fans that probably hear this and think, okay, well, Jackson's really down on Jalen Green. I mean, he doesn't contribute to winning at the same level that Alperen Sengun and Amen Thompson do, unfortunately. And many other people, many other fan bases around the league view that the same way. There is still an incredible amount of upside and potential with Jalen Green. Like the highs are there, the lows are concerning though, and he's coming off. His trade value is probably at the worst that it's ever been, coming off that playoff series where he was basically a no-show for 5 or 6 out of the 7 games. So when I saw that report, I was like, there's not a chance in hell that the Bucks are going to take a Jalen Green, trade package for Giannis. There's no chance. Maybe Sengun and Jalen Green in the same trade package is enough to get it done without including too many other young prospects. And that would be one that I think is a bit more of an interesting option for the Bucks, because essentially you're getting a 2-man duo. Even if you're not super internally high on Jalen Green, you could get back Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green and the future picks. And then the Rockets are still able to hold on to the majority of their cast of characters that made them so competitive this past season, while also still basically upgrading Sengun to Giannis.
Yeah, and I mean, again, one of the problems with the Houston Rockets this past season was just that half-court offense and finding that consistently. Giannis, I know a former Houston Rocket claimed that Giannis had no bag, but the bag is deep for Giannis. It's just not in the conventional way that we're used to guys going to get buckets. The mid-range game has improved a lot for Giannis over this last year, in addition to the fact that he has great touch around the rim. Like, he is not a run and dunk man. Like, yes, he does dunk a lot, but he has great touch around the rim. The post game is expanding, and not to mention what he can do defensively. Like, he is a real bucket. But a question that I have for you, and maybe we get into this in the next segment here, is what is too much for the Rockets to give up for Giannis? And on top of that too, do you think that it might be in the Rockets' best interest to actually move forward, just continuing to go the course of, like, we have a young core here. Like, we don't need widespread all in right now for a superstar, but looking around, like looking at the Pacers of like, hey, they got great players, but like no generational star. Like, can we build our team in a way around what we have that can push us to the next level?
Those are fantastic questions, and we will get to those in just a moment, as well as what are some of the other offers that the Rockets are going to be competing with in this Giannis sweepstakes. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at our Locked On Bucks and Locked On Rockets crossover. Now, Camille, you teed up a fantastic kind of question there at the end of segment 2. And you're right. Like, look, this Rockets team, this is where they're in a very interesting position as far as any kind of leverage or negotiations are concerned in this potential Giannis sweepstakes, as opposed to maybe some of the other teams out there that maybe feel the need to make a big swing at a guy like Giannis, because they just came off a 52-win season. They've got an incredibly young team already, a lot of upside and talent, still some, untapped potential with guys like Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore, who weren't even really part of the rotation this season. Other young guys who can still get better, like Sengun and Jalen Green, they still have room to improve. Amen Thompson's just in year 2, right? Or just finished year 2. He has this incredibly sky-high ceiling. So they don't necessarily probably feel the pressure to go all in for a guy like Giannis to then elevate them to championship contenders. That being said, right, top 3 player in the NBA becomes available. Everybody's coming knocking. Everybody's trying to see what it would cost for them to get their hands on him. And that's where I think it gets interesting as to, what is too much for the Rockets. And I think we kind of already established, right? Like, they're not giving up Amen Thompson. Like, that's immediately too much. Alperen Sengun feels like they'd be very willing to include in those trade talks. And then it's past Sengun, right? How much more are you willing to put on the table in addition to those picks? And I do think that there's a version that, if it was Sengun and like Jabari Smith Jr. and then salary filler and all the future picks package, like that's probably the sweet spot for where the Rockets, would land. Maybe they'd be willing to include like Cam Whitmore as like one extra young piece, just because internally there's been some drama with Cam Whitmore as is. So it's not like he's a big part of the rotation anyways. But they really don't want to move on from Reed Shepherd. Internally, they're still really high on Jalen Green, for better or for worse, whether that's the right decision or not. And even though I could very easily be talked into a version of this team with Sengun and Giannis playing together, right, where maybe Amen Thompson is the centerpiece of the deal, I don't think that they would go that route, right? And so there are different permutations, different variations of what the Rockets could try, or what the Rockets and Bucks could try to achieve here. But it basically kind of comes down to, if a Rockets Bucks deal went through, Sengun is probably the headliner of the deal. Probably one other young guy included in there. Maybe two, but if there is two, that second one is just going to be Cam Whitmore as like a throw in, and then some of those picks coming back. And then the question kind of then becomes, right, how does that package stack up compared to some of what other teams out there are going to be able to offer? I know over at Locked On Bucks, you did a crossover with Locked On Raptors talking about potentially a Scotty Barnes spearheaded deal. And then there's other teams out there, right? The Spurs are heavily rumored to be involved. So if you took that Rockets package, we'll just say Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., salary filler, and picks, how does that stack up compared to some of the other offers out there?
I think you get a more proven entity right away, right? With Sengun, he's already shown like, I'm an all-star, what I can do here. The growth that he's shown during his time in the NBA has been really cool to see as well. So like, you have something that is like, okay, we know what this entity is. You have some good draft picks, especially if that Phoenix Suns pick is involved in there. But it's like if Amen Thompson isn't the headliner player for GM Camille here, I'd be like, that doesn't move me as much. Like, I keep coming back to what the Spurs could offer with them shooting up to second in the draft lottery this year. A package, around Stephon Castle with the number 2 draft pick, with a Hawks pick. I saw this from Bleacher Report, so this is the one that's always in my mind. 27 Hawks first, 28 Celtics first. The Spurs own 2029 first round pick, plus Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson to help make that salary work. I could see the Bucks even trying to push for like another, like, let's try to get one more pick out of this. But I think starting there is like a little bit more appealing than going the other route with Sengun, especially because of the contract situation with the CBA and just how team building is really coming about. Being able to have those guys on those rookie contracts, Stephon Castle, a rookie of the year, the number 2 pick this year, cheap team controlled contracts of players who have really high upside could be the way for the Bucks moving forward after spending so many years in the luxury tax, even before this new CBA kicked into place.
No, that's a fantastic point. And unfortunately for the Rockets, right, both Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green, their rookie scale extensions are kicking in this offseason. So they'll both be making about $33-ish million, give or take, a couple digits here or there. But if you make a deal with Sengun as the headliner, then you're now, granted, that contract is an absolute steal of a deal. You got an all-star, a guy putting up, basically, again, baby Jokic numbers, right? 21, 11, and 5 on $33 million a year for the next 5 years. That's a really favorable contract. That's a guy that, Rockets fans, we've gone back and forth on this, right? Can Sengun be the best player on a contender? That's probably not his best role, right? He's probably best utilized as like the second or third best player on a contender and kind of that connective tissue piece offensively, utilizing his playmaking, his gravity. He's a much improved defender, all these different things. But having that on that favorable contract is great, but not if you're looking to kind of really dive headfirst into a rebuild. And obviously that's really tough for the Bucks, not having control of their future draft assets. And maybe there is a permutation out there. Maybe there's a version of this trade where you do loop in, right, the Pelicans or the Blazers to be able to get back, one or two of those Bucks assets. And then that makes it a little bit easier to stomach the idea of bottoming out, of tanking. That Spurs package is really hard to beat. Like, as soon as I saw the draft lottery and as soon as I saw San Antonio jump up to number 2, I was like, Giannis Antetokounmpo, you are a San Antonio Spur.
If he's not a Buck, which again, I honestly do think that, and this is, you can say whatever it is, the hopium in me, but like Giannis has been very clear. Like, it's not new for us to hear that Giannis is saying, I want to be somewhere I can compete. That's what he has said since he really became this MVP version of himself of, I want to be in a winning situation. As long as Milwaukee can provide me with a situation where I think we can compete, I'm fine being here. He loves the city of Milwaukee. He loves being here. He loves the people and the organization, a very loyal guy. He has not forgotten the help that the franchise and the city bestowed upon him when he was adjusting to life in America for the very first time without his family, getting his family here, all of those things that happened. But he's a competitor and he wants to win. So if the Bucks, which I'm hoping that they have a strong pitch for him this week around why he should stay, which I mentioned, like part of my pitch would be around, this is kind of a gap year, but in this gap year, you could put up some MVP numbers. Like, you've already been top 3 MVP. consistently since you won your MVPs, but like we can, get the narrative running, run it a little bit more Jokic like, and on top of that too, like really try to go after it next year. You're in the East, like it's kind of open right now. Like let's put something together and see what can happen.
And the thing that I want to kind of maybe wrap up on is this idea that, I'm very curious because when a player of Giannis's caliber, right, has this kind of, departure, sometimes it's on bad terms or stuff ends poorly and, leaves a bad taste in fans' mouths. Case in point, the James Harden situation, right? Giannis's competitor for one of those MVP awards. And the guy that, said he had no bag way back when. But right, James failed to deliver a title to Houston ultimately, right? He dealt with the Warriors at their peak with KD and all that stuff. And just, you run into that juggernaut a couple different times and it sucks, right? It sucks that James Harden wasn't ever able to deliver a title to Houston. That 65-win Rockets team is one of the best teams to never win a title in NBA history. That being said, Giannis did it, right? Giannis delivered a title to Milwaukee. How much cachet do you think that affords him, both with the organization itself, with the front office, and also with the fans, to where if Giannis does ultimately decide, I don't want to be here anymore, do you see the Bucks like just sending him to whoever the highest bidder is? Do you think that they'll actually take into account, hey, okay, give us your short list of teams you'd like to maybe be sent to, and then we'll work with you to be able to achieve what you want because we want to do right by you as the player that brought us a title?
Yeah, I think from the GM, like the franchise side of things, like if he had a list, I think that's more helpful. If it was like one destination and one only, and that destination isn't like San Antonio or somewhere that can offer a fantastic package, then I think the Bucks would just kind of be like, well, we have to figure out how to do what's best for the franchise, because we've spent the last, 7-8 years really chasing championships built around you. We've exhausted so many different draft capital and assets to try to put that team around you. And right now we got to recoup. We have to recoup. So I could see them working with him to a certain extent. I don't think they do anything crazy like send him like to Utah or somewhere, where he can't win. But I think a short list would be great. And as for the fans, from what I've seen from Locked On Bucks commenters, from the everydayers, from Twitter, social media, a majority of them would respect it, of like, thank you, Giannis. We get it. We wish you well. Now there's a subset who are like, well, we'll wish him well, but we don't want to see him win. But I don't think it'd be animosity with him heading out the door with like jerseys burning and things of that. He's just given so much to the community, in addition to the championship, through his philanthropy, through him just being who he is, helping put Milwaukee on the map for more people, bringing a championship here for the first time in 50 years. Like, Fiserv Forum is the house that Giannis built. So I think he's always going to be good in Milwaukee, no matter what he chooses this summer.
Well, regardless of what direction the Bucks are, well, if they do decide to ultimately deal Giannis, then they can just build around Kevin Porter Jr. because that worked so well for the Rockets a couple years back. I kid. Look, we appreciate you for tuning into our Locked On Bucks, Locked On Rockets crossover. We want your thoughts in the YouTube comments, though. Let us know what your ideal Rockets Bucks trade would look like. How much is too much for the Rockets to give up? What is the right return for Milwaukee if they do ultimately deal Giannis to Houston or to any other organization for that matter? Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But from Camille and myself, we thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And we look forward to having you back right here, whether it's at Locked On Bucks or Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast homes for everything Houston Rockets and Bucks basketball. There we go.
There it is.